Hello and welcome to another episode of Knowledge Enthusiast Reacts or Comments on, but in this time reacts to the Russian Revolution Part 2 of Oversimplified, or by Oversimplified, which is one of the greatest YouTube channels in historical context around there, and I'm actually a Patreon of theirs, and I am very happy that they released a new video. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, then do so. The link will be in the description. This will be part 2, which will hopefully, or I guess, not be as long as part 1. Either way, if I have something to say in between, I will pause the video and say things, and some of it will be total bullshit or partly true and stuff like that, and in that cases and some other cases you will find more information, clarification, and corrections in the info text box right here, and otherwise you won't, because reading is not the best thing for everyone, I guess. No, just editing the videos with all the info text box thingies. If I would do one every 10 seconds, it would be way longer. Anyway, my name is Oversimplified. I'm 31 years old. I was born in East Germany, but raised and living now in Hamburg, Germany. I'm a former history student without degree, and I'm a former video game journalist. So I'm here to continue my quest to gather knowledge and in some points even share knowledge, but this channel is around learning together. If you like the original video, you found the link in the description below. Please leave them a like and subscribe, and be prepared for new super funny content in the future by them. And anyway, let's continue with the Russian Revolution, which we are now in the year 1914, which is the start of the First World War and the last 4 years of the Emperor or Tsar Nikolai II. It's the name is depending on where you look at. In Russia, it's another name than in Germany and in Great Britain, I think. So Nikolai, Nicholas, and Nikolai, something like that. I'm just. So anyway, let's start the video.
While Nicholas had been busy playing with his new best friend, tensions in Europe had been rising. It just so happened that in 1914, one Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary went for a drive with the top down in Sarajevo. One thing leads to another, and suddenly Russia found itself at war with half of Europe.
Oh, they just reused the content of their World War I video. If you want to know more about that, please go ahead and watch the video I made on that topic. You will also find the link in the description, where I, apart from other things, explain why the assassination of the Archduke wasn't really that big of a deal, at least not for the Austria-Hungarian emperor, who did not even like Franz Ferdinand. And yeah, that's good.
In Sarajevo, one thing leads to another, and suddenly Russia found itself at war with half of Europe. A wave of patriotism swept through Russia. The capital was renamed to Petrograd because St. Petersburg sounded a bit too German. Even revolutionaries were getting on board. To them, World War I was a big stinky imperialist war, but they didn't want their big stinky imperialist replaced by a foreign one. So pretty much everyone wanted Russia to win. I hope Russia loses. Geez, read the room, Lenin. Lenin hoped Russia would lose because that would help him overthrow the Tsar. As long as he did that, who cares if Germany blows up half the country? And blow up half the country, they did. An inefficient Tsarist government meant there were shortages of just about everything you need to fight a war. And if losing... An inefficient Tsarist government meant there were shortages of just about everything...
Actually, you might already know about the world famous Fabergé eggs. And actually it was like every Easter since I think Alexander III and Nikolai did continue this tradition, the Tsar would give one of those Fabergé eggs to someone as a gift, as a present. And today they're worth a lot, and they were worth a lot at that time because they're made of gold, jewelries, you know what I mean. Nice stones. And yeah, this was partly to make the Tsar shine in light of generosity, of yeah, in a good light, more or less. And like I said in the last video, due to the industrialization starting very, very, very late in Russia, even at that point, the only thing they really had were soldiers, millions of them, in fact. And this is more or less their whole strategy throughout the war, is throw as many soldiers as possible at the Germans. Whereas the Germans even had their fair share of trouble with those soldiers, and are said to have financially supported any revolutionary movements within Russia and outside of Russia. You might know about the Germans sending Lenin back to St. Petersburg from his exile in Switzerland, which, funnily enough, which I found out doing my research on World War I, but only after, because yeah, the video was already edited, so it is not in that video. But apparently the German government did not send Lenin at all. It is a rumor. That rumor was started shortly after his arrival. So even from in that time, this rumor still was there. But so first misconception is he was not sent by the Oberste Heeresleitung, or the higher command of the German army. He was sent by the Auswärtige Amt, or the Foreign Bureau, or the Bureau of Foreign Affairs, which is common practice for everyone from a foreign country. And it was that Lenin, as well as many other Russians, just asked the German government if they could be sent back to their homeland, not to start revolutions and stuff, just because it is their homeland. And there were actually a little bit of struggle within Germany, because they did not want to support the enemy in that case, because those people they were sending to Russia maybe could join the Russian forces. And but they did send them anyway. And with the train of Lenin, it's a kind of special situation, because Lenin actually had a friend in the German government, something with S, Stalin, or not Stalin, that sounds too much like Stalin, something like that. I will put it in the info box. And was sent there with over 40 others, including his wife and his mistress, and was sent back to Russia, but as I said, not with the intention to start a revolution, which at that point they were sent back had already been started. And this, as I said, is just a rumor or myth that started after the fact in Russia itself by the political enemies of Lenin, because they wanted the people to believe that he was in the German pocket and was therefore more or less a spy of Germany.
Of half the country, they did. An inefficient czarist government meant there were shortages of just about everything you need to fight a war. And if losing a teensy-weensy war with Japan upset the people, losing a giant Wyatt war like this was much worse. Soldiers were deserting, the economy was imploding, and in no time, Russia was starving. The peasants were getting more peasanty, the workers were getting more workery, all the while Germany was getting more Germanery. Dmitri, we need to win this war. I need someone with a great military mind to step in and take control. You're right. How about General Hickenlooper? How about me? You can't run the war. Who'll be in charge of the country while you're gone? Obviously, my German wife and a homeless wizard. Duh. Nicholas declared himself commander-in-chief and
Commander of cheese. Yeah, so not to be confusing, the whole house Romanov was a German house. Nicholas himself was a descendant of Germans, but also of the, I think, Swedish king. And he actually served some time in the Russian military prior to his coronation. So, he would always find that time to be the best time of his life, more or less. It was the first time he was around people of the same age, of the same gender, so he made his friends, and therefore it was only natural for him to now be their commander, to be with them. So he actually drove to the front line, to the headquarters of war, and would help fight the war from there, being around sometimes even friends and people he might know, or at least in an environment he really felt good in the past. So but even though he was schooled as an officer, like it was usual for the royal family or the male heirs of the royal family, he was not a great strategist, and this would show shortly. But yeah, actually he was in the military, and it was a time of his life.
My German wife and a homeless wizard. Duh. Nicholas declared.
But yeah, Alexandra was even more German because she was directly from Germany, which was one of the reasons why the marriage was a little bit frowned upon. And Queen Victoria would be against it, as well as the Russian court, because Queen Victoria, because she did not trust the Russians, and Alexandra is actually her granddaughter or something like that. And the Russians, because she was German, and there already were tensions between the Germans and the Russians. And even though House Romanov was, or the full name is more than that, with some German thingy in it, I will put it in the info text box. Even though they were of German descent, since Catherine, they were more or less seen as true Russians, because they converted to Orthodox Church, they learned Russian, they would put Russia in front of everything, and later Tsars more or less, but especially with Catherine. And so the Tsar itself was not seen that much of a German, even though there were some people who did not forget about that and always thought, okay, our Russian Tsar is fighting, our German Tsar is fighting against the Germans. And now he leaves his actual German wife, who were reluctant to convert to the Orthodox Church, in charge, together with this homeless man we do not trust, who's crazy and who might even boink her. And yeah, this was a huge scandal. But yeah.
While you're gone. Obviously, my German wife and a homeless wizard. Duh. Nicholas declared himself commander-in-chief and went to the front lines, leaving his German wife in charge while they were fighting the Germans. It wasn't a good look. And because Alexander was so close to Rasputin, people believed that he was actually calling the shots and secretly destroying Russia, and maybe even boinking her. An even worser look. At this point, a bunch of nobles just couldn't take it anymore. Rasputin is destroying the country. We have to break his magic spell over the Tsar. But how? He's magic. Dude. Very cool. Hey, it's Rasputin. The sexy party is running a little late, but in the meantime, why don't you try one of these totally not poisoned cakes? Dude, why'd you say it like that? He's totally gonna know they're poisoned now. Shut up. I said they're not poisoned. Dude, he just ate so much poison. How is he still alive? It must be the magic. Go with plan B. Is he dead? See, Boris? I told you he was the Antichrist and you didn't believe me. Can you shut up for 1 minute and help me roll him up? Are you sure he's dead? I don't know, but I'm supposed to be hosting a charity auction right now. Can we get this over with? Okay, now he's dead.
Unwiderstehlich. Crunchy.
The murder of Rasputin.
So yeah, the story about Rasputin is there is the legend or the allegedly events of the evening, and there is the evidently events of the evening. So all we know for sure is that Rasputin was killed by gunshots, one shot in the head especially, and that those responsible were some nobles who actually were his friends prior. And now we have the legend, which was told by one of those assassins, but is not really proven, which is the story they told here. So they invited Rasputin to a dinner, and then they gave him cake and other stuff which was poisoned, and he ate it and ate it and ate it and showed no sign of being intoxicated or something like that. Then he would order some wine, and they gave him the wine, which, you guessed it, was also poisoned, and he's said to have drank 3 bottles of poisoned wine without showing any sign of being poisoned. Then he gets shot 2 times in the chest, 1 time in the head, is as the story goes, if I recall correctly, and left to die. Then those responsible, those nobles, would dress up as Rasputin, drive to his flat, to his apartment, and make sure to be seen, because they wanted the people to believe that Rasputin on this evening would reach his home and couldn't therefore be killed by those noblemen. And when they returned, Rasputin, with the last strength he had, would have crawled all the way down to the outside of the house in the snow, because it was winter, if I remember correctly, and would there still alive. Either that or another account, or I don't like I said, it's pretty confusing, and I can't recall it correctly. Maybe he was still in the house and attacked them while they were getting back, and now they wanted to get rid of the corpse, and then to their surprise he attacked them. And anyway, so they shot him again, and we're still not entirely sure if he was dead. Then they rolled him into the loafer and throw him into the river, which with some people saying that at that point Rasputin still was alive. But then finally being dead. He was found dead the next day, I guess. And so some believe that this could have happened because there are people who, for example, survived shots in the head if nothing vital or very vital was damaged. But the most, so usually the most people think that this story is just to maybe blow even more the myth around Rasputin, because he was believed to be some kind of healer, some kind of holy man, some kind of entity, if you want. And to underline this, they made up this story. So we don't know what exactly happened. All we know is Rasputin was dead.
Okay, now he's dead. The murder of Rasputin, just like his life, is shrouded in mystery and speculation. He probably didn't really die like that, but he also probably didn't really heal people. He probably didn't influence the Tsar as much as people thought. He probably wasn't secretly destroying the country. But what he definitely did do, even in his death, was ruin the Tsar's reputation. Russia's autocracy looked more outdated than ever, and the Russian people were taking notice. Come on, men, remember what we're fighting for. Yeah, no, we're out. World War I left Russia broke, hungry, and exhausted. And with Nicholas acting as commander-in-chief, he was getting even more blame. For the second time, Russia was on the brink of revolution. By 1917, Russia had been fighting a war it couldn't afford for 3 years. They were running out of many things, most worryingly, food. On International Women's Day, 1917, thousands of hungry women in Petrograd were so sick of being hungry that they took to the streets. And it turns out it's not...
I don't know why this is so funny, but this, I'm hungry. Hi, hungry. I'm Martha. It's okay. Sorry, this it just caught me off guard.
Hungry women in Petrograd were so sick of being hungry that they took to the streets. And it turns out it's not just women who experience hunger, but men too. So the next day they joined in as well. Gatherings on the streets were forbidden, but I'm not sure how you'd arrest 250,000 people. The crowds demanded an end to the war, an end to food rationing, and even an end to the Tsar's autocracy. Now, normally the troops would deal with this kind of thing, but as it turns out, soldiers get hungry too, and they were also tired of having to kill their fellow Russians so much. So entire regiments mutinied in the capital, and they joined the crowd as well, trashing symbols of the Tsar and his autocratic regime. Things were escalating very quickly. Liberal politicians watching the riots in the streets had long been dissatisfied with the Tsar, since he would shut their parliament down anytime they did something he didn't like. They believed the only way to bring stability back to the streets was for Nicholas II to abdicate. The riots continued. The police fired on soldiers. Soldiers fired on soldiers. The workers re-established the Petrograd Soviet. Politicians began arresting the Tsar's ministers. He may have been an autocrat, but he just lost complete control of his capital city. Talk about embarrassing. Nicholas, the...
Yeah, so forget your spices, forget your salt, forget your weapons. The single most important thing to not only humanity, but all living beings is water and food. If you have only one of those, things are getting really, really, really bad. So a lot of are those Adidas shoes? A lot of, and by a lot of I mean almost every revolution in the world, every violent outbreak of anything is to some degree, you can break it down to people being hungry or thirsty or both. Because you might already know this, but as a living being, we cannot function without energy intake. And that energy intake is food and water. Without water, we dehydrate and all our inner organs collapse because they need water, because we are made of water by a large percentage. and food, which delivers all the nutritions, all the energy, all the calories we can burn. And without those, we die. So people usually are really against dying. And so if you ever want to be a ruler, the first thing you have to make sure is always and will always be that your people can eat and have something to eat, and of course have something to drink, because without water you are not to last very long. Water today in most developed countries is not the huge problem, as well as food. Water in Russia might not have been a real problem because they're not in the desert. They have a lot of ice, which they can make their own water of, but they need food, especially because of all those ice, because food tends to be not that keen on growing in ice. So you have a whole population, even the army, because as he said earlier, the army was very undersupplied, and they all have no food. And responsible, if you then like again in the French Revolution, if you then see your the people who are richer than you having food and having plenty of food, even so much food they can waste it, then you get pretty angry. And especially if you have a specific person you can make responsible for having no food, and by which is the only person who might give you more food. Or else you tend to lean to people who promise you to give you food, which in that case are the not the Soviets in that case, but the those who were later known as the Whites. I don't know if that were the Dumas or...
He just lost complete control of his capital city. Talk about embarrassing. Nicholas, the troops have turned against us. The people have taken over the city. They've even cut my phone line. Hello? Hello? The phones are down. Things must be bad. I'd better go back there. Nicholas hopped on the next train back to Petrograd, but he never made it to the city. His train was met by military generals and other politicians. What's going on? Nicholas, look man, we need to talk. It's not you. It's us. Aw, who am I kidding? No, it's definitely you. During the whole crisis in Petrograd, the liberals convinced the generals that if Nicholas abdicated, the people would calm down, and the generals were on board. They didn't have time to quell the chaos, because don't forget, they were still losing a global, all-encompassing war against the Germans. And with the military no longer on his side, Nicholas had no choice but to step down.
And usually at first, not usually, actually at first, Nicholas did abdicate and did also remove his son from the line of succession. So his part of the family would abdicate, but instead his brother would be the new Tsar. And I'm not sure if that actually came to be, or if all the events did prevent that from happening, with the House Romanov then ending after around 300 years of reign. But it was not like the whole empire or the whole royalty was dismissed in one single abdication, whereas Nicholas and Alexei would abdicate or be removed from the line of succession. His brother was to take to be the new Tsar, but I'm not entirely sure why he then did not become Tsar. I think he died.
And with the military no longer on his side, Nicholas had no choice but to step down. Throughout his entire reign, he had done everything he could to keep all the power for himself. And in the end, that's exactly what left him with none. But then there was a big question. Who would replace Nicholas? Well, his son Alexei was next in line. Hey buddy, Daddy couldn't handle the complex socioeconomic problems of a giant multinational, multi-ethnic empire that's engaged in total war with all of Europe. You think you could give it a shot? Alexei just wasn't ready to be Tsar. Nicholas did have a brother, but given the state of the empire, he wasn't keen either. And so, 300 years of Romanov rule in Russia just kind of came to an end. The earlier 1905 revolution hadn't changed much, but this new revolution had left Russia without a Tsar. And still, before the year was over, there would be one more revolution left to come.
And an uprising.
Nicholas's failure as commander of the armed forces was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Do you think maybe you could have done any better? Well, guess what? It's time to find out in Rise of Kingdoms. Rise of Kingdoms is an epic, massive multiplayer, free-to-play, real-time strategy game. Choose from 11 historical civilizations, including Rome, China, or France. You can form alliances with other players, or conquer the crap out of them in real-time strategic battles. Oh look, it's Master Tactician and Handsome General Alexander the Great. If you want my advice, the troop is the most important chess piece in a battle. In Rise of Kingdoms, each troop can be controlled. To win a battle, you need to utilize careful position.
I really would love, and this makes me kind of really hope for that. I would love an oversimplified video on the on Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic wars in that time.
Through unique troop formations while using terrain to your advantage. I literally won the Battle of Gaugamela with fewer troops by using superior strategy. You're wrong. Joan of Arc? That's right, noob. Listen up. I'm about to drop some knowledge. The commander's skill is way more important. Each Rise of Kingdoms commander has their own unique skill.
I would also love an oversimplified video about the 100 Years' War, in which Joan of Arc had at some point a huge role. And maybe he is actually working on both at the moment, or it's a team, I think, and that would be great. I'm really interested in ancient history, and I also am really interested in the medieval times. Not so much in the modern times, because it's too modern for my taste. But yeah, I would love it.
Look at me. I've added attack and defense buffs to my troops. Whoa. I'm also able to cure my wounded soldiers. Cool. And I can increase their wood gathering speed by 10%. Not as cool, but okay. In Rise of Kingdoms, the decision is yours. Now go ahead, choose your favorite real historical figure and lead your troops into real-time battle. Download Rise of Kingdoms now for free by clicking on the link in the description below. Join me and 50 million other online players and guide your civilization from a lowly clan into a great empire. Now where was I? Oh yeah. Hungry woman, absolute chaos, and the end of the Tsar. Oh, hey guys, says here there's been a revolution, and the reign of the Tsars has ended. Oh, come on, I missed another one? Why am I even in this video? Well, it's not like you could have done anything. As long as there's a world war, you can't get back to Russia. Who wants to start a revolution? Revolution. Dang it! Despite getting rid of Nick, Russia was still at war with half of Europe. The Germans, however, had an idea. They thought that if they helped Lenin get back, he would cause trouble for the new Russian government. So they put him on a train. Destination, Petrograd. It was a long journey, and while Lenin was cooped up in his train, things in Russia were changing.
As I said, this is mostly a myth and a rumor that was spread right after the fact. And as far as I know, Lenin was not intentionally, and to be clear, not by the army, sent back to Russia. Especially not with some kind of order to create chaos inside Russia. As I said, at this point there already was chaos in Russia, and they would pull out of the war sooner or later, even without Lenin, I think, which won't happen until 1918.
It was a long journey, and while Lenin was cooped up in his train, things in Russia were changing. Workers were taking control of their factories. Soldiers were socking it to their mean old officers. Without a czar, a big old power vacuum had opened up, and someone needed to fill it. The liberals proposed they be in charge, and they set up the provisional government. The workers, however, had already begun establishing local Soviets, largely controlled by the social revolutionaries and the Mensheviks. And since neither felt like they had the power to oust the other, Russia ended up in a classic dual power conundrum. The two coexisted, with the provisional government becoming the official government and the elected Soviets issuing orders to the workers and soldiers. This power balance was delicate, and all it would take is one bold revolutionary to come along and give everyone a big-brained beatdown. Oh boy, Lenin's coming home. I can't wait for him to see all the great things we've accomplished. And I'm gonna show him my fan art. Oh look, here he comes now. Shut up, shut up! You all suck! The provisional government sucks, the Soviet sucks, even your fan art sucks! Why does he have to be so mean? In case you couldn't tell, Lenin wasn't a fan of everything that had been happening. In his April theses, he called the provisional government and the Soviets a bunch of big bourgeois bozos. And he kinda had a point. There was still a lot for the Russian people to be mad about. The provisional government hadn't got Russia out of the war, the people were still hungry, and the peasants were still hoping to get more land. Meanwhile, the Soviets hadn't done much to change things either. But even though they weren't perfect, a lot of people did like what the new government had been doing. There was progress. The secret police were disbanded, the death penalty abolished. They even planned to hold elections, meaning for the first time ever, the Russian people could choose their own government. To many, Lenin seemed like some out-of-touch weirdo. If Lenin wanted to go from whiny irrelevant zero to hunky communist hero, he'd need to shake things up a bit. So he and the Bolsheviks came up with a hot new slogan.
So, yeah, imagine like Lenin for a huge part of his lifetime wanted to have a revolution in Russia, wanted to overthrow the government, wanted to enforce more or less communism in Russia. And then he had the opportunity, but while he was still in Switzerland and on his way, maybe even negotiating the terms of getting back to Russia, the Russians had already kind of stabilized again. So all these power vacuum, this chaos was more or less has kind of normalized, and then you see we have it now into or in front of our own eyes. What I just said, what the people want is bread. He could peace. Yeah, sure. As I said, no one wants to die. Peace would ensure that, but peace is not always the first interest, because for some, peace would also mean that they will lose land, that they will even lose more food or something. Land is okay if you want to make more food or if you want to make more money to buy more food, but the single most important thing in this slogan is bread, because that is something everyone wants, to at least everyone who is poor and has no bread. They don't care about peace first and foremost. They don't care about land first and foremost. They care about themselves and their ability to have the basic human right to eat. And this is what the Bolsheviks want to give the people, and kind of succeed in long term, more or less.
Communist hero, he'd need to shake things up a bit. So he and the Bolsheviks came up with a hot new slogan that promised to give the people what the provisional government wouldn't. Peace. Don't like war? We'll end it. Land. You want land? We'll give it to you. Bread. Hungry? Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Lenin also called for all power to the Soviets, which meant getting rid of the provisional government and having the Soviets run the place. A communist dream. The people liked these slogans, and bit by bit, the Bolsheviks became more popular. Some Mensheviks even began switching sides. But even though the people thought Lenin's slogans rocked, as long as the provisional government didn't mess up, they'd continue to support it. So let's check in on the provisional government. Oh, provisional government, you've made a big mess. The provisional government lasted for just 9 months, but those 9 months were chaos. The people wanted Russia out of World War I, but Minister of War Alexander Kerensky thought instead of doing that, why not do the exact opposite? If the people saw more Russian victories, they'd have to support the new government, and that went just about as well as you might expect. These heavy defeats worsened the Russian economy and made the hungry people hungrier. And by now, I think you know what comes next. They trashed the place. More looting, more rioting.
Yeah, that's the July uprisings in 1917. Short thing about Leo Trotsky. Trotsky was you know, like after Lenin dies, Stalin and Trotsky were those who could have succeeded him. We all know that Stalin would succeed and Trotsky would be assassinated later. But don't think of it like if with Trotsky things would have been better in terms of world relations, because Trotsky was a communist hardliner, and he took the Marxism very close to his heart, especially the proletariats of in German it's Proletarier aller Länder vereinigt euch, and in English it's proletarians of all the countries unify. And this is what Trotsky always wanted. He wanted the communism to spread all over the world. He wanted to have uprisings and chaos all over the world. And Stalin, on the other hand, was more focused on Russia and the greater Soviet Union, and was not so keen on aggressively spreading communism. He wanted to deal first and foremost with his own front yard, if you want so. So that much about Trotsky.
And by now, I think you know what comes next. They trashed the place. More looting, more rioting, more violence. It was like the Tsar had never abdicated. Tens of thousands of armed workers took to the streets during some of the worst violence Petrograd had seen yet. And in response, Kerensky called in the troops, who opened fire on the demonstrators. For now, Lenin and other Bolshevik leaders wanted to distance themselves from the violence, but the crowds marched under Bolshevik slogans, and as a result, Kerensky, now the prime minister, took the opportunity to stamp down on the Bolsheviks. Their leaders were arrested. Lenin was accused of being a German agent, and he was forced to...
Yeah, this, as I said, Lenin was accused of being a German agent because I don't know if the Duma was actually the ones who spread the rumor about Lenin being paid by the Germans to go back to Russia to start a revolution, or if he just helped spreading the rumor and using this as an opportunity to get rid of Lenin. But yeah.
The Bolsheviks. Their leaders were arrested. Lenin was accused of being a German agent, and he was forced to flee to Finland in disguise. This sucks! Now I'll never get to have my revolution. Why are you wearing a dress? It's a disguise, idiot! And it makes me feel pretty. Kerensky had successfully dealt with the violence, but he just couldn't catch a break. This increasing support for more extreme forms of socialism, along with the poor handling of the war, alarmed traditional liberals and bougie business boys. To appease them, Kerensky decided to promote a military legend to Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, someone who hated the revolution, loved the death penalty, and was devoutly anti-socialist, General Kornilov. Hey man, thanks for the promotion. That was real swell of you. Of course, with you by my side, who would dare try to overthrow me? How about me? I did not see this coming. Unfortunately for Kerensky, Kornilov hated the liberal and socialist reforms of the new government, particularly the dumb socialist soldiers' committees. The army was no place for undisciplined left-wing snowflakes. Fearing a Bolshevik takeover was imminent, Kornilov ordered his men towards Petrograd to oust the Soviet and take over. Kerensky freaked out, and he needed help. Since he knew Trotsky was finger-licking good at organizing, he and other Bolshevik leaders were released, and they, along with the Soviet, organized the defense of Petrograd. Kornilov had the power of soldiers, but the Soviet had the power of workers. And they did what workers do best. Railroad workers diverted Kornilov's men away. Telegraph workers messed with his communications. They even infiltrated his forces and encouraged the demoralized men to desert. They were also armed en masse, but in the end, no fighting was necessary because Kornilov's coup just fell apart, and Kornilov was sent straight to prison. Everything was coming up Kerensky. Hey, thanks for the help, boys. Couldn't have done it without you. Now that there's no longer any threat, how...
And now he gets betrayed again, and...
Yeah. Kerensky. Hey, thanks for the help, boys. Couldn't have done it without you. Now that there's no longer any threat, how about you, return all those guns I gave you? No. Oh, no! In order to kill a rat, Kerensky had just given a gun to a bear. A Bolshevik bear. The whole affair was a huge propaganda win for them. They had defended the revolution, and their popularity skyrocketed. They found themselves elected to the Petrograd and Moscow Soviets, with Trotsky even becoming chairman in Petrograd. They were now in a very powerful position, almost powerful enough for Lenin to return home from Finland and finally stage his long-awaited communist revolution. The Bolsheviks began planning their takeover of the Russian government. Some got cold feet and began arguing against Lenin's armed revolution in favor of a more peaceful approach, and they even wrote newspaper articles about it, which kind of gave the whole scheme away. The Bolsheviks are planning an armed revolution? I did not see this coming.
You didn't. This is now the October Revolution, which is, I believe, started in November, but due to the Russians using the Julianic calendar, it was still October in Russia, and the revolution itself was not really bloody as you would expect from a major revolution. It was more the aftermath that was very, very bloody, like especially the civil war that followed. And we have to remember that at this point, the Tsar is still alive, still probably well, abdicated, but I think he was under he and his family were under house arrest, and all the other royals all still alive, and this would change drastically within the civil war, with, as you all know, the royal family being executed, as well as many other royals in Russia.
No way. The Bolsheviks are planning an armed revolution? I did not see this coming. Kerensky began arresting Bolsheviks, and as a result, Lenin and the boys felt they had no choice but to commence the revolution right now. Lenin was back in Petrograd, but was still in hiding, so Trotsky got the ball rolling, using his position as Soviet chairman to organize the Bolshevik militias. Now, if you were to ask Soviet artists, the revolution went something like this.
And I don't know why Lenin
As
was
much as they
always
would like
put
you to think it was a
in the
glorious,
center.
violent, heroic takeover, the truth seems to be a little more underwhelming. The Bolsheviks just kind of walked into key buildings in the city and took control. Bolsheviks supporting sailors even brought in a huge battleship, but there wasn't really any fighting. Nobody really tried to stop them. In just one day, they took control of the city. Next,
But I think a few people died, like less than 10, but a few died.
nobody really tried to stop them. In just one day, they took control of the city. Next, Kerensky just managed to escape before the Bolsheviks surrounded the Winter Palace, placing the provisional government under siege inside. Is it safe to come out yet? I think so. Fear my revolutionary might! Give me that. That night, Lenin came out of hiding to play a bigger role in the revolution. With him back at the helm, they had one more job to do: storm the Winter Palace and arrest the provisional government. And here comes the final showdown. The palace was defended by a force known as the Battalion of Death, who immediately gave up. And just like that, Lenin had won. As far as violent, bloody revolutionary uprisings go, this wasn't really one of them. But Lenin was finally in charge of Russia. He had spent his whole life dreaming of this moment. He set up the first Council of People's Commissars, his own cabinet, with him in charge. This was it, his chance to finally make his communist utopia, with equality and freedoms beyond compare. Hey Lenin, before we took power, they were planning on holding elections. Shall we go ahead with those? Of course. You can't have a communist utopia without high levels of political participation. The proletariat should be free to elect who it. What? The social revolutionaries won. We lost. Those don't count. Lenin claimed the elections were unfair, and the Constituent Assembly they created was counter-revolutionary. He presented the new assembly with a motion that basically said, sign here and give up your power. And when the assembly was like, no, Lenin said, see, they're disobeying me. Proof they're counter-revolutionary. Shut it down, boys. Moderate socialists and others weren't happy when Lenin had the assembly closed by force, and when campaigners began taking to the streets, they were fired upon. For Lenin, setting up a communist utopia was looking suspiciously like setting up a dictatorship.
I think Lenin was a very, very strong Marxist, and he loved Marxism. And I think he was so much loving it that he believed that everyone else would also love it. Which is why he let those elections happen. Maybe even thinking that, of course, his Bolsheviks would win, would win. But yeah, you can have free elections, but in the aftermath, just say no. If the results are not in your favor, you can just say nope, I do not accept that, and then start to spread rumors about the opposing party, or as they did, just go ahead and overthrow them. But I think the whole affair would have been much easier for the Bolsheviks if they would just won the war, because in that case maybe that would even prevent the civil war.
For Lenin, setting up a communist utopia was looking suspiciously like setting up a dictatorship. While he was implementing many of the communist policies you'd expect, he was also refusing to work with other political parties and cracking down on opposition. Hey Lenin, are you setting up a dictatorship? I'll shoot you if you are. Of course not. What a crazy theory. Anyway, I'm pleased to announce I'm setting up a secret police force to repress and kill traitors. And by traitors, I of course mean anyone not loyal to me. Owie, 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 owie. The assassination attempt made on Lenin's life in August 1918 failed, but in response, the Bolsheviks ramped up their oppression. But while all of this chaos was erupting back home, Lenin and the boys were also distracted by another problem. They were still at war with the Germans, and they had promised to give the people peace.
Schon wieder Rückenschmerzen. Voltaren Schmerzgel fort.
So Lenin made Trotsky Commissar for Foreign Affairs and sent him off to negotiate a peace deal with the Germans. The Germans offered Trotsky really harsh terms, you know, because they were winning the war. They demanded Russia give up a butt-ton of land, something that would be devastating to the economy. Look, I know it's not great, but I think we have to accept it. Are you insane? This will ruin us. Hey Trotsky, you got a big brain. What do you think? How about no war, no peace? What's that, Mr. Trotsky, sir? It's simple. No war means we'll stop fighting the Germans, but no peace means we won't sign the peace treaty either. Then, when the Germans say we've just stopped fighting, they'll have to leave us alone or something. Trotsky, that's genius! I could kiss you!
How could this ever happen? I mean, and during the First World War, the Germans made a lot of gambles. They gambled with Belgium, they gambled with the Americans, they gambled with their trench warfare, they gambled with Russia, and they lost. Of course, they lost. And now this is not even a gamble. I mean, in what mindset do you have to be to believe that in a war, if you stop fighting, that the enemy would also stop fighting, because their main goal is to defeat you and also to take your stuff, and that is best accomplished by taking your stuff, which is even easier if you stop fighting. So how could I mean, you have to imagine there is not only Trotsky and Lenin, so the politicians. That's orders they have to give out to the generals, and the generals have then to say, great idea, let's do it that way, and have to issue that to their commanders and to their soldiers in the end. And they all have to say, great ideas, let's stop fighting and hope for the best. I think what would be better is an armistice. Just have an armistice, so there is actually no fighting, but also no peace, because a peace treaty would come later. You could just sit it out and hope the Germans would lose on the other fronts, like they did, which then would mean you have a way better position to negotiate the terms, or if they win, I mean, how much more can you lose? But just stop fighting without any kind of treaty to the Germans. That's just a stupid idea. I actually did not really know about this. In my knowledge, it was always that the Germans sent Lenin, there was the whole revolution, and then they just pulled out of the war and Germany was happy. This part is pretty much new to me.
Have to leave us alone or something. Trotsky, that's genius! I could kiss you. Do you want me to kiss you? Stop asking me that. Trotsky's no war, no peace plan was a huge success. Oh, wait, no, just kidding. It went exactly as you'd imagine. When the Germans saw the Russians had stopped fighting, they slammed 700,000 troops deep into Russian territory with no resistance. Now, the new peace treaty offered by the Germans was way worse, with Russia losing a huge amount of territory, population, and resources. The Bolsheviks had no choice but to accept, and Russia was humiliated. With Petrograd now in an exposed position, Lenin moved the capital to Moscow, just in case. Things really weren't going well for Lenin, and many people were extremely unhappy with the Bolshevik government and its actions. Lenin, you've pissed off so many people that they've united against you. We're under attack. Relax, we always expected some counter-revolutionary pushback. I think we can handle a few angry monopoly men. But Lenin, it's not just the monopoly men. Okay, who are we up against? Well, the liberals, the social revolutionaries, national separatists in Poland, Finland, and the Ukraine, independent warlords setting up chiefdoms, anarchist rebels, the Green Peasant armies, the Cossacks, the Caucasian states, the Baltic states, the British, the French, the Americans, and the Japanese. Oh, and a legion of Czechoslovakian soldiers seem to have taken over the Trans-Siberian Railway and stolen all the imperial gold reserves. What? How could this get any worse? Oh, and it says here your mother-in-law is coming to stay. No! A variety of anti-Bolshevik forces had united together to topple Lenin's government, and Russia descended into a full-blown civil war. Now, the Russian Civil War was extremely intricate and would really need its own video, but essentially, the anti-Bolshevik white movement gained control of vast, underdeveloped areas, while the Bolshevik Reds controlled the industrial heartland, using this to their advantage.
There was actually a third force, which also had a color. I don't know if it was green, the Greens, but it was only a very minor force. And the White Army is more or less believed to be somewhat responsible that the Tsar would be killed, because the Tsar was with the Red Army. They were somewhere outside of Moscow. They should be transported to Moscow to get trialed, but then it is still unclear today what exactly happened, but it is believed that the Soviets decided that a big trial would be too dangerous, because if the Tsar would be found innocent, and like earlier with the election, there was a possibility to lose. But if the Tsar would be found innocent, then the whole revolution would be endangered, because in that case, what is your exact claim, and what do you base this claim on if the Tsar is in the right? And on the other hand, they did not want the White Army to get hand on the Tsar, because they could make them to martyrs. They could be some kind of symbol figures. So they could, in some way or form, inspire the counter-revolutionaries in that case to actually kick the Red Army's ass. So, and the location, the village where the Tsar family was at that point, was very exposed. So the White Army was getting closer to it, and there was a possibility that they would get their hands on the royal family. So it is still unknown who gave the orders. But yeah, the Tsar then was killed, and later in the 80s, 90s, somewhere later, they actually were I don't know how you say it in English, but they're holy now by the Orthodox Church. The Russian Orthodox.
Underdeveloped areas, while the Bolshevik Reds controlled the industrial heartland, using this to their advantage, along with the surprising military genius of Trotsky and the shocking disorganization of the White Army. The fortified Red Army gradually came out on top. It was an absolutely brutal conflict, with both sides committing horrendous atrocities. To maintain order at home, the Bolsheviks began the Red Terror, and the secret police would execute tens of thousands of suspected traitors. No one was safe from the violence, not even Nicholas himself. You've probably been wondering what Nicholas has been up to this whole time.
What was this?
Nicholas himself. You've probably been...
What's that? What's that? Let's just Playback speed.
You've probably...
What should we do with him? So that's all? Did they made a mistake? Is that something they cut out? I have to look at the Patreon page. Yeah.
I've been wondering what Nicholas has been up to this whole time. Well, after his abdication, he and his family were placed under house arrest. At first, they were allowed to live in their usual luxury, but after Lenin took over, their conditions worsened. The Bolsheviks were just holding on to Nick until they could work out what to do with him, but the Civil War complicated things.
Okay.
The last thing they wanted was for Nick to be freed by the White Armies. And so, to stop this from happening, Nicholas's Bolshevik guards decided to act. It's not entirely certain whether Lenin ordered it, or if the guards were acting on their own volition. But on July 17th, 1918, with White Armies approaching, they woke Nicholas and his family in the middle of the night and brought them into the basement. There, a drunken squad of Bolsheviks murdered the entire family. Nicholas, the last Tsar, once one of the most powerful men alive, had met a brutal end.
Actually, as far as I remember, they were told that they would make some kind of photograph, and therefore they were asked to behave and all get into the basement because the photo equipment was in the basement and stuff like that. So they weren't even told they would be shot. They were told they would be made a photograph of them. And then they when they're all in their positions and like posing for the non-existent camera, then they would all be shot. That's what I read. If I'm wrong, I will put it there. If I'm right, I will also put it there in clarification. But that's very brutal, and I never understood why this was necessary. I mean, look at Germany. When our emperor abdicated, he lived still until the start of the Second World War. So he lived on for like 20 years or so, and he never claimed his throne back or something. He never started the counter-revolution. He just accepted, and I think Nikolai was also on the more accepting side. I think all he wanted, like I said earlier, he was a family man. All he wanted was his family to be safe, and I think to reach that, he would have done everything. So it's very, very sad what happened to them, and it was later on declared a crime even in Russia. So at least there's that.
Tsar, once one of the most powerful men alive, had met a brutal end. But after years of fighting and millions of deaths, Trotsky and his Red Army came out victorious. Wow, that was a close one. Okay, back to creating a communist utopia. How are we doing on that? Well, the Civil War helped create a massive famine and about 5 million people starved to death. There's massive inflation and the ruble is worthless. Hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of railway track have been destroyed.
That inflation actually was so the Soviets wanted to get rid of money and because they couldn't just stop the usage of money because everyone had money and everyone was using it, and no one would have obeyed them if they just saw, okay, stop using money now. They started their own hyperinflation, like you have seen it in Germany during the Great Depression, when a loaf of bread was worth 100,000 mark, and the Germans just would print even more money because they thought that would help in some way. In Russia, they did this on purpose. They just printed money like hell in an attempt to make it worthless, in an attempt to get rid of money whatsoever. I don't have to tell you that this did not work out, but this left the Russian economy very, very, very in ruins, more or less.
People starved to death. There's massive inflation and the ruble is worthless. Hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of railway track have been destroyed. Disease and epidemics have killed 3 million. The population of Moscow and Petrograd has collapsed. Life expectancy has plummeted. Sailors in Kronstadt are rebelling. People are freezing to death in their own apartments, and life has been reduced to a constant search for food and shelter. Whoa. Well, this just means I'll have to work twice as hard, day and night, to save the country. Nothing will stop me, short of a couple sudden strokes. Get the doctor. One thing you have to keep in mind is that everything I've been talking about, the Civil War, the assassination attempt, and Lenin's struggle to maintain control at home, were all happening around the same time, and it must have been extremely stressful. Lenin began getting headaches, insomnia, and in 1922, he suffered 2 separate strokes. As the Soviet Union was officially declared under a strict one-party system, Lenin's health continued to decline, and his ability to lead the Communist Party went with it. Everybody assumed Trotsky would succeed him. He was a great speaker, he'd won the Civil War, and he had a dope-ass train. The last person anyone expected to take over was Stalin. Stalin wasn't a great intellectual like Lenin, or a charismatic war hero like Trotsky. He was, as one Menshevik described him, a gray blur. Someone who operated in the background. Someone who you might not even notice. But it was in the background that Stalin would rise to power. Here's how it happened. After the revolution, all the Bolsheviks hoped to get a cool job in the new government. What did you get? Commissar for War. Sweet! What'd you get? Secretary.
Yeah, he would use this position to gain even more power. But what I actually read when I at some point read something about Lenin was that Lenin had some kind of fear for Stalin. He once wrote a letter describing the differences between Trotsky and Stalin, with concluding that both of them would that Stalin would be not suitable for the role of leadership, while Trotsky had his flaws but would be a perfect candidate. And then a later letter he would even say very, very, very bad things about Stalin, and saying how unsuited he would be, and that but that he now rose to power because of the powerful position he kind of made himself, and might be even unstoppable if they wouldn't stop him now. And he actually wanted the Soviets to deal with the situation and to do something about Stalin, but then he died and the Soviets did nothing, and the rest is history. Oh.
Sweet! What'd you get? Secretary. Stalin was made general secretary for the Communist Party. It wasn't what he wanted, but Stalin quickly realized that even though it wasn't fancy, it was a powerful position. As secretary, he had the power to give people jobs within the party. So he would give jobs to all of his pals, who in turn would give him their support. The more pals he gave jobs, the more power he got. The more power he got, the more pals he got. Lenin may have been having wall-to-wall strokes, but he was still involved in the party, and he was taking notice. He wasn't a fan of Stalin abusing his position, or insulting his wife to her face. Lenin knew he couldn't let Stalin take over, but by this stage, he was just too sick to fight it. Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir. Blah. Whoa. Deja vu. Lenin's last wish was to not let Stalin take over, but by the time he died, Stalin was too powerful to remove. He had his remaining opponents arrested or killed. Trotsky was banished and fled to Europe. Eventually, he would be assassinated by Soviet spies in 1940. Our dear comrade Lenin has died. We should have a state funeral. No. Let's mummify him and put him on display so people can look at his dead body forever. That's gross. You're gross. Guards, kill him. Lenin had waited so long to take control in Russia, but he never got to see his communist utopia. His short time in charge was spent dealing with the destroyed Russian economy, World War I, and the Civil War. He was cruel and merciless, but he really did seem to believe communism would make Russia a better place. Stalin, on the other hand, would take the Soviet Union down a different path. If you thought Lenin was a tyrant, well, you ain't seen nothing yet, girl. A secret police state, a rapidly militarizing superpower, led by a paranoid man who deeply distrusted the West, would see the world come to the brink of nuclear annihilation. That's right, I'm talking about Remember to click the link in the description below to download Rise of Kingdoms for free. Fight alongside allies, conquer other players, and use superior tactics to emerge victorious in a strategic battle royale. Again, click on the link in the description below, and I'll see you there.
Yeah, that was the Russian Revolution Part 2. And as I expected, I wasn't able to say that much about it, even though I paused the video at some points. But in the end, mostly what I did was telling you what they would tell you later. As I said, this was a reaction, not primarily a commenting video, and it was yeah, I learned a lot of new stuff, and I'm pretty sure again that I will have messed things up of which I thought I knew stuff about. But yeah, it was pretty interesting, pretty funny. I'm very glad that this channel exists, even though they will more like very likely claim this video for copyright infringements like the last one, but that's okay. That's okay. They deserve it. And yeah, so what do you think of the video? What do you think of this video? What do you have to add? Did you learn anything new? Tell me in the comments. If you like the video, like and subscribe. If you don't like the video, dislike and tell me why, perhaps, maybe. And if you like, maybe tell me why you like, because this is a new channel. I want to make content that you can engage with, that you can feel good with. So this video will be released slightly after the first part, and by slightly I mean however long it took me to edit it. And maybe in between the misconception video by Salmonella was already going online. So in that case, be prepared for the next video, which will be on the German reunification, and a separate video explaining or shortly explaining the political system in Germany. And if don't, then you can be happy to watch the historical misconceptions video that will be released before that and after that. Yeah, here at Knowledge Enthusiast, I put out a new video every second day if I manage to do so. And without further ado, I wish you a good night. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.